Hi everyone, my name is Zhao Qianliang. Today I'm gonna talk about the environmental ethics and impacts of chocolate and coffee and how these two products are going to impact our environment and ecosystem. First of all, I'm gonna introduce some background information for you guys so that you will have a basic knowledge of how planting these two plants work out. High quality Arabica coffee normally cultivated in the foothills of the Central of America and southern Brazil. Most coffee beans grows on the trees in the tropical forest, and as Brazil is the country that produces the largest amount of coffee, local people cultivate coffee under the full sun exposure. Coffee beans that cultivate under full sun exposure are easier to be impacted by wind and forest damage. On the other hand, they often require expensive agrochemical inputs which can lead to soil erosion as well. Coffee beans grow in the highlands, meanwhile, coca beans often grow in lowlands. Chocolate is produced from the coca plant and grows near the Amazon basin. But now, most coca is planted in West Africa and cultivated also under the full sun exposure. One thing that is interesting to notice is that commercial chocolate is processed with high quantities of sugar, but the coca itself has a really bitter taste. Then I'm gonna talk about what's the environment like for growing coffee and coca beans. Coca Coffee growing conditions require cool to warm tropical climate and enriched soil. The world's coffee belts span the globe along the equator, including the North, Central, and South America, the Caribbean, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Meanwhile, coca growing conditions require the coca plants to grow in the humid lowlands of the rainforest. The temperature and the rainfall in the rainforest is crucial for the coca plants to grow. The world's coca belt is along countries that are between 10 degrees north and 10 degrees south of the equator, like Ghana and Indonesia. Then I'm gonna introduce you guys the two methods, which is sun growth and shade growth, and how are they different and how does it impact our environments. Shade growth is the traditional way that mimics how coffee beans used to grow, which is growing underneath a forest canopy. Therefore, it is a way to grow coffee beans that benefits both the farmer and the environment. Shade growth also use cooler temperature and higher altitudes to create shadow for the trees and cause the bean to be denser, which means that denser beans develops more flavor and acidity, which ensure its higher quality and better taste. On the other hand, full sun grown is a moderate way to grow coffee beans that produce high yields and gives the farmer higher profits as well. Thus, a lot of countries are instead using the sun-grown method in order to earn more money. But the sun-grown method tends to lead to more deforestation in country as well. For example, in Guatemala, growing coffee bean is not a major cause of deforestation because they are still using the shade grow method. On the other hand, in Central America, there was a 2.5 million acres loss of forest because of the sun cultivations of coffee. And under the sun growth method, farmer remove it's gonna remove all natural barriers to the pest and reduce bird habitats, and they might have a higher use of chemical pesticides to keep the pest and disease away from the plants in order for them to grow healthily. Then I'm gonna specifically talk about how shade growth impact environment. In order to provide the best environment for the plants to grow in shades, taller trees that create large amount of shadows needs to be planted on the land. And greater amount and varieties of trees are planted, the amount of biodiversity also increases. As As the biodiversity increases, there are a lot of benefits to the ecosystem and the environment as well. For example, different microbes in the soil break down organic matter and cycle nutrition back to the plants. Another example is that growing different variety of crops together will increase their resistance level to the pest and disease. And the shadow from the trees will also offers protection from the topsoils to prevent nutrition getting washed away by rainfall during the season. The increase of biodiversity will also increase the population of wildlife. When the population of wildlife is increased, and it will also do benefits to the growth of both plants. Increased amount of trees can increase the population of the birds in the surrounding areas. Increased diversity of trees provide more habitats for the birds, and the bird species diversity will be increased as well. And birds can also help the growth of the being as the natural predator for pests. And last, greater tree diversity also increases the population of pollinating insects like bees, and there is research has shown these insects increase the productions of coffee cherries. In comparison to the shade growth, the sun growth method seems to have more negative impacts to the environment and the ecosystem. Coffee beans that under sun cultivation is considered as monocrop with no diversity of other trees, which cause the plants get easier to damage by the pest and disease. And sun-grown coffee trees otherwise provide no benefits for the soil of the land because plants are fully exposed to the sunlight without any canopy from the trees. One thing that is pretty important is that monocrops contributes to soil degradation. The cycle of nutrition back to the plants is hard to complete because of the decaying plants. Thus, organic fertilizers needs to be added to the soil so that the plants can grow under the sun cultivation. But when the rain washed away the extra fertilizer to surrounding ecosystem, will lead to negative consequences as well. One of the negative consequences that extra fertilizer can cause is eutrophication. When excess fertilizers that contain nitrate and phosphate get washed into rivers and lakes, the increased level of the two chemical compounds can cause the algae to bloom. When the algae blooms, the oxygen in the water will be used up and cause other underwater organisms to suffer from the lack of oxygen. And the worst results will cause a creation of a dead zone where nothing can live under the water. Lastly, we're gonna discuss about ethics behind planting coffee and cocoa beans plants. As both coffee and chocolate are consumer goods on a daily basis, it is crucial to think about these questions regarding environmental ethics. And the first question is, as a farmer, using the shade growth method can effectively create benefits for the environment and ecosystem in the tropical forest. Also, the products will come out in better quality as well. But using the sun-grown method will have more profits from selling the products, yet it will also cause destruction to the forest and negative impacts to the ecosystem. What would you choose? Second, as a consumer, would you decline these products for the sake of the environmental health, or would you think of other way to protect the environment and ecosystem? For me, if I was a farmer, I would rather choose the shade-grown method than the sun-grown method. Because first of all, the sun-grown method is doing too much damage to the environmental and the ecosystem. I understand that even if I can earn more profits through the sun cultivation, however, if the planet is getting hurt because everyone wants to earn more money from harvesting these plants, then the ecosystem will be destroyed and some of the resources for us will be no longer available, and the whole human species will be in danger. This resource is even worse than earning less money from the harvestation. Therefore, protecting the environment and the ecosystem should be the first thing to come to mind if we are doing something that related to them. And thank you. That's it for today.